Hi, I'm Ron DeHaas. I'm the president and CEO of Covenant Eyes, and I welcome you to our weekly broadcast here on Wednesdays. This week, I'm excited to meet with Lina Abu-Jamra, who is a doctor, and she also has an interesting ministry. She started a ministry called the Living with Power Ministries. Her website is livingwithpower.org. And I'm glad to have you here today. I understand, Lina, that you are not only a doctor, but you also you're from Lebanon originally, and you also provide medical care for Syrian refugees. You've actually gone back to Lebanon to do that, and you also have a ministry for singles. And that's one thing that I'd like to talk to you about today. The ministry for singles, I understand you have a weekly broadcast, Today's Single Christian, on the Moody broadcast.
It's daily, actually.
Oh, it's daily. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I have an eclectic ministry, no doubt about it. You know, I felt called to serve the Lord in really in vocational ministry back about 15 years ago. I was finishing up my fellowship in pediatric emergency medicine. And, it was the context of it was in teaching the Bible and communicating His Word. And I didn't know how it would play out. This was 2001, 2002, before iPhone, smartphones, before Facebook, before Twitter, before any of those mediums. Blogs and were just starting, like really mid-2000s, they kind of grew. So I started a blog after I moved into my first job because I wasn't in a church. And I just sort of did what I could in the context that I could. And the Lord is really taking me down a road that's been very surprising. I do a little bit of everything, but the primary goal is to communicate biblical truth for everyday life and to bring hope to the world, the hope of Jesus. So it's been fun. Mm-hmm.
So your broadcast, Today's Single Christian on Moody, your daily broadcast, obviously is directed at singles, and I'm sure we're going to have singles who are watching this. But I understand that you struggled as a single person, that you at one time were confused and maybe disappointed, discouraged, defeated even, but you found strength through something, didn't you? So tell us about that.
Not through the chase, exactly. So basically, my long and short of my story is my calling into ministry came out of brokenness. I think I was already following Jesus and living obediently to the Lord as much as I could. I had a very simple dating life. I never dated until I went to, really, my dad was traditional Lebanese. We moved to the U.S. and I was quickly on the road. I was 15 when we moved. I went to college quickly. I was 16 when I went to college, went to Christian college. And so really was in this zone of, my dad was a doctor. So once I decided to be a doctor, I was really focused on studies, and my family encouraged that, so that I never dated much. We can get back to that, because that doesn't mean that you don't have sin in your life. And so much of sexual sin happens in here and in here. And I had an internal struggle with all that, package. Obviously, we're on the show, Covenant Eyes, so we're going to talk about some of that stuff. But I finally finished med school, went to residency, got engaged, and 2 weeks before the wedding, ended the engagement. But there was sort of an undertone, a backstory to all of that, in that I had a guy who had been my best friend for 10 years, and I really felt like God was going to work out that relationship. Everyone assumed we might get married, and sort of people would say things like that to us, and we talked every day. So emotionally, I was very attached to that person. And anyway, ended the engagement thinking God would deliver that other relationship, and God did not. The guy ended up marrying someone else. He's happily married, living for the Lord right now, and I was devastated. I moved into a okay.
Yes, we're back again. I was just for those who just joined us.
So 10 years later, I got engaged again and ended up breaking that engagement. In that window, I was still pursuing the Lord, working through all of the disappointments and all that. And this is exactly when the Lord brought Moody Publishers into my life and asked me to write a book on singleness, which was so God, directed, because I never would have thought to do that. And by then, of course, I had so much baggage that I thought that God knew would be helpful. And so I wrote my first book, Thrive, and out of that has been that radio show that you mentioned, Today's Single Christian. Many people might be familiar with it because it's all over right now, mainly the South, the Midwest, the East Coast, some West Coast. It's carried over 200 stations, and so it's a daily spot that's 1 minute long. So it's been really cool to see God do this thing. So yeah,
that's great. We will be posting on the comments the links to your book and also your other resources as we go along here. By the way, if any, I know there are single people out there listening to us, and if there are any singles out there who have a question for Lina is an acclaimed speaker, and she'd be glad to address your questions. If we can get them live in the comments even right now, be glad to take those questions and address them even while we're doing this live. I also would like to ask you to join, all the viewers, to join our YouTube channel. We're going to be doing this every Wednesday, and if you join our YouTube channel, you'll be able to find out what resources we're providing on a weekly basis. So Lina Abijamra, I have a question for you. Apart from cheering on the Green Bay Packers, which I understand you do, how do you stay strong as a single person?
I tell you what, it's not that complicated. I stay strong by staying in the Word. I really do stay in the Word, and I'm in community with other Christians. The reason to stay in the Word is not the point.
Missing our connection again.
It's to connect to Him. Can you see that, or?
Yeah, the connection's breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
Something's.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably Chicago. I live in Chicago. It's probably something in the airwaves here, but I'm sure it's not out of the Michigan context. So now listen, I think the point of reading the Bible and the point of studying the Word is to be in connection with the Lord. And the hardest thing for any Christian, I think where we struggle, is when we don't feel the love of God. We don't feel connected to God. We don't have intimacy. And so the only way, I think, to really connect regularly with the Lord is to be in His Word. Again, not as an endpoint, not as a check off, like, oh, I just did my duty, but as a way to communicate to God and to hear from the Lord. And then I think the strength of being in community with other Christians in the local church, really, I think, is the way that God devised it for us, is to then communicate and to be in accountability with other men and women who are following the Lord, who want what's best for us, who God has put in our life to help us achieve Christ-likeness and to grow in our walk. And I know sometimes that sounds very church talk, but it's not. It's very practical. I actually work in the world. There's a nurse that sits right next to where I sit in the ER who's a Christian, and we talk about this stuff at work. We talk about the struggles for purity. We talk about loneliness. We talk about every single thing that I think we as humans feel. And I think whether you're a doctor or a preacher or a plumber or a school teacher, we all have, whether you're Lebanese or American. I've spent time all over the world, and the root of our heart is that we long to be seen and loved and known. And that's what God gives us, but we're so blinded to it because we're in such a rush to pursue the things that we think will make us happy. And every time I've gone down that path, I've hit a wall and eventually come back to the place where I'm like, God, I just need to be in community with you, in communication with you, in intimacy with you. And out of that comes victory.
Mm-hmm. We here at Covenant Eyes also believe in community. We work with a lot of churches and denominations to develop communities within churches, segments of a church or denomination that actually address this issue that we're involved in pornography. And I know, in fact, we even have an ebook. If you go to covenanteyes.com/ebooks, we have an ebook that's called More Than Single, and it's an entirely free resource. But we recognize that one of the devastating issues that singles face is the issue of purity, and especially with relation to pornography. And so I wonder if you could just kind of hone in on that particular
I've written
topic.
about that, and I speak about that, and more so, the reality is that the struggle is real. And when you talk about pornography, I think automatically some people might say, well, I don't watch, I don't subscribe to any XXX rated, stuff on the computer. Who does that? And you automatically sort of distance yourself from it. But as you know, working with Covenant Eyes, which by the way I'm a huge fan of, I actually have a Covenant Eyes account. But I think lust and this degrees of pornography presents itself to all of us Christians, to all humans, but particularly I think to the single, who it's like the forbidden fruit. And so there's always this sense that God is holding out on me. I wrote a blog post once about 5 years ago or so. Will there be sex in heaven? And it was sort of like this, kind of a cynical take on it, like we're gypped, like single people are gypped. You don't get to have sex here on earth, and you don't get to have it in heaven. And there's a sense, I think, where singles can get stuck in that, where we have needs, and and God isn't providing it. And so even the singles who might consider themselves more, let's say, self-righteous than others and say, well, I don't watch this pornography, which by the way, many do, but even the ones who don't still struggle with lust, with masturbation, with fantasizing, women particularly, all of those things that come with that world of I think, sexual desire and sexual immorality. And I think the struggle continues. I've written about it. I don't think there's ever people, sometimes when I speak about these topics, I think people assume, well, you're a Bible teacher and you're stronger than the average single, and so you don't struggle with that. I beg to disagree. It's a daily struggle, and it's a daily pursuit of the Lord, and it's a daily feeding on the Lord, so that when I am in a good place with Him, the struggle becomes less and victory becomes more. And we have the ability to have victory. God has given us that ability. Now, how do we stay in a place where we're in tune, where we're living that victory? And by the way, I've been greatly benefited by services like Covenant Eyes, programs, groups, and really, I believe with all my heart, I wrote about it before I'd heard about Covenant Eyes. Back when 2012, when my book came out, one of the keys to freedom for me in that area came when I finally opened up to my small group leader at a time. I'd been going to small group for 3 years. I've never really verbalized, here's what I struggle with. I sort of, how we do in Christian world, we're like, unspeakable sins that we just don't mention in small group. And then one day I took her out to coffee after 3 years of being in the group, and I said, I've got to talk to you about this. And I was as open and blunt as I could be. And that was the beginning of freedom for me. And I write about it clearly in my book, and I believe in it. And even in the last month, God has brought some friendships in my life where I've been able to be very open and honest about the continued struggle and the desire for victory. And Jesus, I think, comes alongside us and helps us by using people in our life to help us stay accountable and to achieve, to feel the sense of victory that is already ours in Christ. We're not fighting for victory, we already have victory, but I think we can start feeling like failures, and Satan takes such joy in bringing such condemnation on us, so that we can never become what God wants us to be, even though we already are that person in Christ. And so I feel so passionate and strong about this, because I understand that it's not easy. And I wish it was. I tell the Lord sometimes, God, I just wish you could just make these desires go away, or bring someone in my life. That's what single people pray. I wish you would just bring the person in my life, that way I wouldn't struggle. But as you know, Ron, that the struggle continues if it's not dealt with, whether you're single or married. And if you can't deal with your heart and what motivates you to act a certain way, you never get that victory.
So, Lina, if I can speak for, which I really can't do, but if I try to speak for the single people out there that might be listening, I'm sitting here and I'm depressed because there's nobody in my life, and maybe I'm even struggling with pornography. I'm certainly struggling with a variety of issues, as we all do.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Lina Abu Jamra, and I'm thinking, boy, I wish I were her, because she seems like such a strong person, and she's got it all together. But my self-speak, how I talk to myself, says, no, I'm not there. I'm lonely. I'm depressed.
Yeah.
I'm discouraged. I don't have anybody to talk to. I don't have a community. And so, Lina, what are the steps then that a person who might be saying that right now? What are the steps that person can follow?
Yeah. First of all, I think you're believing a lie if you look at someone and think they don't have a struggle. That's just purely a lie. There's no. I tell people I haven't hidden it. I don't act like I've got it together. I've written about my struggles, and I've continued to talk about my struggles because it's real. And in God's goodness, He's protecting me. He's protected me over the years. And by the way, sometimes we look at things in our life and we think it's a curse. Like, for instance, I don't date a lot. That's an exaggeration. I don't date at all. So I remember last time I went on a date. Now, sometimes as a single person, you can feel so bad about that. You'd be like, well, I'm not desirable. God has ignored me. I'm not good enough. You can fall down that path of negative thinking. But what in good moments, I think God has really protected me from sinning in a way that is much more maybe hurtful to me. So I've still struggled with sin, but I've struggled maybe in a much more private fashion. And so that's God's grace in my life. And yet still the feeling of shame and guilt that comes along with the struggle, I think is real. And I think I've had to work through those layers of things and really come to a place of freedom and keep going back to that place of freedom in Christ. So that's number one. Don't believe the lie that people don't have problems. And in my situation, read my material and you'll see that I am exactly like you. I struggle with loneliness. I struggle with depression at times, maybe not clinical depression, but where I just feel like I'm in a pit of self-pity and I just can't get out of it. I mean, at the end of the day, I tell people, I mean, you can get in this mode where you're like, well, I'm alone, I have no one to talk with, and that's it, I'm screwed, and it's over. And you can tell someone, well, you need to reach out to someone. They're like, well, I don't have anybody to reach out with, so I'm done. You have, I mean, there's a point where you got to turn your position of your life towards God. It can be as simple as saying, like David did, God, are you there? Will you intervene for me? It can be as simple as that. Now, I think we do have an active responsibility to reach out to someone. So I tell people all the time, email me, Lina@livingwithpower.org. Okay, you don't have another friend. God has put me in your life right now. I understand the struggle, and I'm here for you. We want to pray with you. We want to give you resources that will help you. My ministry team, which is a very small team, we're serious. We're not joking. So if you're that person that has no one to talk with, God has just provided you one person. But generally speaking, the local church, get up on Sunday and go. I know it's hard. It's still hard for me. I'm a leader in my church now. I'm in a new church plant in downtown Chicago, and God has given me some opportunities to do some things in church that are pretty cool. But for the past 3 years, I was in a bit of a church desert. So I understand how hard it is. But you've got to show up. Like at some point, you just got to show up. And sometimes it starts with baby steps of you saying, God, I'm ready. Now help me. Because we can't get out of that pit. And what Psalms 40 tells us is that he reaches in and he gets us out of the pit and he puts our feet on a rock. That's how, by the way, back in 1999, 2000, when I was really devastatedly heartbroken, I felt like God had abandoned me. I really was so depressed and lonely. I was in a new town. I faked it. No one could tell. But it was a bad time for me. And when I finally was like, every day, all I would do is read the word a little bit, and I would just ask God to help me. And one day, I'm telling you, this is how God worked, and this is how I believe he'll work. I got visitors to my doorstep in a town that I knew no one in. And I had just shown up to church during that season. I didn't know anyone at church. I literally showed up and sat in the back and went home. But I filled a little card that said, I'm new to church. One night, it was pouring rain. And 3 old people, I mean old, like over 75, had driven to my house. I was on their visitor list. And that started my rejuvenation, my renewal of getting back to understanding that God sees me and loves me. It was such a random thing. And that ultimately became how I started teaching the Bible. One of those ladies taught the Bible study. She eventually moved to another church with her husband, who was a pastor, had been asked to lead the church in the interim, and they asked me to teach the Bible. And that's how I started the ministry that I'm in right now. I believe God can do the same for the listener right now who has no one to talk with. Mm-hmm. And it could be as simple as this. I'm the person who's knocking on your door gate going, I'm here for you. Email me. I want to help you. Covenant Eyes, that's what you do. Join it. I don't know if you guys have a program where you can assign people. If you're a woman, I subscribe to a ministry. What is Crystal's ministry? Dirty Girls Ministry. Yes, Dirty Girls I subscribe to that. There's a community of people who are struggling with the same type of things that you are. We're all struggling. Now let's help each other and let's fulfill the work that God has put us on this earth to fulfill.
Amen. So if you were to recommend one resource for that person from your website, what would that resource be?
Okay, I'll tell you. I mean, I would say the lowest. You want something that's free? I would say get my book, but that's $10. So okay, you want money? Yeah. You're like, oh, I'm in a bad place. Go to my website under Bibles, under books. Under books, there's 3 books listed. Each one says watch DVD. Go to the 5th DVD series, click on it, and you'll get 6 20, 30-minute teachings and a question and answer session where I talk about all of this, bitterness, self-pity, loneliness, self-control, how to overcome lust and masturbation and things like that, and sexual sin, overcoming combination. All in this is free. Watch DVD under books, under Thrive, or email me if you can't remember that, Lina@livingwithpower.org, and I'll send you the link.
So we'll put your email address up in the comments because you offered that to people if necessary. If I don't have somebody in my life, if I'm single, hey, now you do. So I like that.
Amen. Now, we're serious about that.
Now let me take a step forward for the listener, the single listener who might be a little bit farther advanced along, already has a community, perhaps belongs to a singles group in their church. Would you be available to come and talk to that singles group?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I do it all the time. There's, if you go under my website, under About, it'll lead you to that, to all of that. But just go under About. and there'll be a little link there. I can cater it to their needs. We don't have to talk. People always think, oh, if you're single, then you're going to talk about sex or waiting, even though there are two big issues in singleness. I really just teach the Bible in a way that's very practical and encourages people and helps them with their calling and trying to figure out how we can fit into the church and how God has a plan for all. There's so many things that to me, there's no difference if you're single or married. We're children of the Lord, and God has a plan for us, and He wants to fulfill His plans in our lives. And so, most single people I see end up getting married. Despite the high rates of singleness right now in the United States, most single people do end up getting married. I've seen it happen in groups that I've gone to speak with. They'll be so like, oh, we'll never get married. And eventually they all sort of do. I'm the one who hasn't, but it's either way, whether you do or not, God just has a plan for your life. He wants to fulfill it, and you will not. I've been there. You'll never. The reason sexual purity is so important is because I don't think we'll ever feel that sense of freedom that's already out in Christ in order to live the life that He's called us until we deal with that issue. Mm-hmm. I think that's why I'm so passionate about talking about this, is that you have, and for the seasoned Christian, one thing I thought you were going to ask me, what about, I think you can be a seasoned Christian and show up to church regularly and be serving in the church and still be struggling massively in your thought life, in your visual life, what you're spending your time on the computer in. And indeed, I think that's a tragedy. And the reason behind that is a lack of authenticity and the willingness to be vulnerable. And it's driven out of fear. What will happen if they find out that I'm not who they think I am? And I've learned that if you really find Christian brothers and sisters who love the Lord, they're never surprised, and they're always full of grace because they show you the same love that Jesus has shown them. They understand. And I have so much love and grace for people who are struggling with sin, because there is a better way.
Yeah, who better to turn to than those who are going through the same struggles as you are? So definitely, I like that approach. So, Lina Abu-Jamra, livingwithpower.org is Lina's website, and I know we have a singles group, a Christian singles group here in our community of Owasso, Michigan, and they're often looking for a program to have when they meet. And so it sounds, I would love to hear you give a talk. That would be fantastic. Yeah,
it would be awesome to come. Do I need a passport to get there?
No, I don't think so. No. We used to be the wilderness, but we're back in civilization now. So that's here in Michigan. Good. So yeah, so we have been spending this time with Lina Abu-Jamra of Living with Power Ministries, livingwithpower.org, and I thank you for joining us here on our continuing series of YouTube live broadcasts. And I really enjoyed this interview with you, Lina. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it very much.
Likewise. So, thanks for having me.
Visit her site. Great site. Thank you.